The phone pressed against my ear felt heavier with each passing second. My mother's voice came through clear and cutting, the way it always did when she'd made up her mind about something. "Let's be honest, Naomi," she said, her tone somewhere between pity and judgment. "You can't afford Christmas this year. The family is doing a nice dinner, and everyone's contributing. It just wouldn't be fair to burden you when you're in your situation." Behind her voice I heard laughter. My sisters probably. Maybe my aunts. They were already there, already celebrating, already discussing me like I was a charity case that had become too expensive to maintain. "So you're uninviting me?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. "I'm saving you the embarrassment." He paused. "It's for the best, really. You can join us when things turn around for you." The call ended before I could respond. No goodbye. No apology. Just the flat tone of disconnection. I stood there staring at my reflection in the darkened window, my phone still pressed to my ear, my hand shaking. Not from sadness yet. From something else. Something that felt like the final click of a lock I'd been standing behind my whole life. I sank onto my apartment floor, my back against the wall, still holding the phone. The carpet was worn but clean. The apartment was small but paid for. My life wasn't falling apart. It just wasn't impressive enough for her standards. My chest burned. Not from the rejection itself, but from how casually she'd delivered it. Like uninviting your daughter from Christmas was just another item on her to-do list. Check the mail. Water the plants. Exclude Naomi. The worst part was the background noise. They were already there, already gathered. Already having the family time I'd been quietly removed from. She hadn't even called me privately. She'd done it while surrounded by people who agreed with her. I pressed my hand against my chest, trying to ease the ache that had settled there. "She's done this before," I whispered to my empty apartment. "Just never this openly." The pattern was clear now. Every slight, every comparison. Every time she'd introduced me as my daughter who's still figuring things out, while my sister was my daughter the regional manager. This wasn't the first warning. It was just the first execution. My name is Naomi Foster, and I'd always been the dependable one. The quiet helper who showed up early to family events to set up tables and stayed late to clean dishes. The daughter who never complained, never caused drama, never demanded attention. I worked as a graphic designer. Not flashy. Not executive level. Just steady, creative work that paid my bills and let me sleep at night. I wasn't wealthy, but I wasn't drowning either. I lived within my means, saved when I could, and didn't buy things to impress people. But in my mother's world, that made me invisible. Success was measured in job titles and square footage, and the ability to pick up the check at expensive restaurants. Quiet stability didn't photograph well for her social media. I'd learned early not to share my small victories. Landing a new client. Finishing a challenging project. These things meant nothing compared to my sister's promotions or my cousin's new car. Once, I'd quietly paid for my mother's roof repair when a storm damaged it. $5,000 I'd saved over a year. She never thanked me. She told people at church that someone had blessed her with the funds. When they praised her faith, she just smiled. The pattern had been there all along, woven through every holiday like tinsel. Christmas wasn't about family, it was about performance. Who'd done well that year? Who hadn't? Love came with conditions, measured in accomplishments and contributions. When my sister got her first management position, she was seated at the head of the table. When I got laid off from my job 3 years ago, I was asked to help in the kitchen instead of joining the family photo. I thought that was temporary, that once I rebuilt my career, things would change. But the labels stuck. Even after I'd found steady work, even after I'd rebuilt my savings, I was still Naomi who's struggling. The Christmas before last, my mother had announced gifts would be practical this year. Everyone received thoughtful presents. I got a budgeting book and a gift card to a discount store. Last Christmas, I'd offered to bring dessert. My mother said not to worry about it. "We know money's tight. Just bring yourself." Then she'd told everyone I couldn't afford to contribute. Now this Christmas, I wasn't even invited. The progression was complete. From disappointing daughter to absent daughter. Problem solved. The broke label had come from one career setback. I'd been laid off 18 months ago when my company downsized. Not fired for incompetence. Not failing. Just caught in corporate restructuring that eliminated my entire department. I'd filed for unemployment. Freelanced while searching for permanent work. Found a new position within 4 months. Not my dream job but stable. Good benefits. Room to grow. But my mother had latched onto that 4-month gap like it defined my entire existence. Never mind that I'd paid my bills. Never mind that I'd never asked her for money. The fact that I'd been unemployed at all was evidence of some fundamental failure. She's having a hard time, she told people. Her voice dripping with concern that felt more like judgment. When I got the new job and tried to share the news, she'd said, "That's nice, dear. Hopefully this one works out better." Then came the comment that cut deepest. My aunt had mentioned she'd run into my mother at church, and Mom had been so worried about me. "She told everyone you were struggling spiritually," my aunt had reported. Said unemployment had shaken your faith. I'd never said anything about faith. Never complained about my circumstances. She'd invented a narrative where I was broken, and she was the concerned mother bearing the burden of my failures. Her church had become central to her identity. Grace Community Church, a large congregation where appearances mattered almost as much as faith. The sanctuary had donation boards tracking major contributors. The bulletin listed families by their giving level. Bronze, silver, gold, platinum. My mother was gold level. Not through her own income, but through the combined efforts of her social circle. She organized fundraisers, sat on committees, made sure everyone knew she was a pillar of the community. Generosity there wasn't private. It was performed, announced, photographed for the newsletter. I'd stopped attending her church years ago. The judgment was exhausting. The way people sized you up based on your clothes, your car, your contribution level. Faith had become a competition I never wanted to enter. But the church mattered to me for one reason. My father had helped build it. Literally. He'd been part of the construction crew that raised the original sanctuary 30 years ago. Worked weekends for months as a volunteer. Donated materials when the budget ran short. He'd died 5 years ago, and the church had dedicated a small memorial garden in his honor. It was the only part of that place that still felt sacred to me. The money I'd given my mother over the years had never been acknowledged. The roof repair was just the biggest example. There'd been smaller things too. A car payment when she was between jobs. Groceries when she was a little short. Birthday gifts for my nieces that she took credit for. I'd never asked for repayment. Never expected recognition. I helped because that's what daughters did. What good people did. But she'd rewritten the history completely. In her version, I was the one who owed her. She'd sacrificed so much, raising me as a single mother after Dad died. She'd given me everything and received nothing in return. The first time I heard her tell someone I was ungrateful, I'd confronted her. "I've helped you financially multiple times. Money you gave freely," she'd countered. "As you should have. After everything I did for you." The logic was dizzying. My help didn't count because it was expected. Her support did count because it was generous. The scales were always tipped in her favor, no matter what I did. Christmas Day arrived without me. The photos started appearing on social media around noon. The family gathered in my mother's living room, everyone in matching sweaters she'd bought. My absence was visible. An empty chair at the table. A gap in the family photo. My sister posted a picture. "Blessed to spend the holidays with people who matter." The caption felt pointed. My aunt shared an album. Beautiful Christmas celebration with the family. Every photo carefully curated to show abundance. Belonging. And then came my mother's post. A photo of the dinner table, laden with food. The caption read, So grateful for family and the spirit of generosity. Some people understand what truly matters. Someone commented, "You're such a giving person. Your daughters are so lucky." My mother's response, "I try to lead by example. Generosity starts at home." The irony was suffocating. She'd uninvited me for being broke, then used my absence to perform generosity. The same woman who measured my worth in dollars was now claiming to value what truly mattered. I spent Christmas alone in my apartment. Not dramatically, not bitterly, just quietly. I made myself a simple dinner. Watched movies I'd been meaning to see. Tried to ignore my phone buzzing with family photos I was tagged in but not included in. Around 8 in the evening I finally cried. Not the loud, gasping kind of crying. The quiet kind that comes when something ends. When you finally admit a truth you've been avoiding. She wasn't going to change. This pattern would repeat. Better job, bigger apartment, more money. None of it would be enough. Because the problem wasn't my success. It was her need to be superior. I cried for the relationship I'd wanted but never had. For the mother who saw me as competition instead of a daughter. For all the years I'd tried to be good enough for someone who would never be satisfied. Then I stopped crying. Miti. Sat at my window looking at the city lights. I was done explaining myself. Done trying to prove my worth to someone who'd decided I had none. Done playing a game where the rules changed every time I got close to winning. 6 months passed. I didn't attend Easter. Didn't call on Mother's Day. Didn't respond to occasional texts asking me to stop being dramatic. Focused on my work. Took on extra projects. Built my portfolio. Saved aggressively, not for anything specific, just for the security of knowing I could handle whatever came. My supervisor noticed the change. "You're really hitting your stride," she said during my review. "Your work has gotten even stronger." I smiled but didn't explain that strength born from rejection cuts deeper than success born from support. Then the email arrived. Not from my mother, from Grace Community Church. A mass message to everyone on their mailing list, including me, though I hadn't attended in years. Subject: Critical funding gap. Please consider giving. The church was struggling. A major donor had withdrawn support. Programs were being cut. Building repairs were overdue. They were reaching out to former members, current members, anyone who might help. The email mentioned my father's memorial fund, which had been established after his death to help with building maintenance. I stared at that line for a long time. The memorial fund bearing my dad's name. The funding crisis was detailed in a follow-up newsletter I read online. The church needed $80,000 to cover immediate repairs and maintain their outreach programs. Without it, they'd have to close the food pantry, cancel youth programs, and defer necessary maintenance. The building my father had helped construct with his own hands was falling into disrepair. I thought about what he would do. Dad had been generous without performance. He gave because he could, not because he wanted recognition. He'd taught me that real generosity was quiet, personal, between you and your conscience. Don't do it for applause, he used to say. Do it because it's right, then walk away. My mother had learned a different lesson from church. She'd learned that generosity was currency, social capital to be displayed and traded, faith as performance art. I'd learned my father's version. The kind that didn't photograph well but let you sleep at night. Memories of my father flooded back. The way he'd slip extra money into my college fund without mentioning it. How he'd volunteer at the food pantry before dawn on Saturdays, never posting about it, never expecting praise. After he died, people came forward with stories. He'd paid someone's medical bills. Fixed a widow's furnace for free. Mentored young men who needed father figures. My mother had seemed surprised by the stories. Like she'd lived with him for 25 years and never noticed who he really was. "He never told me about those things," she'd said at his funeral, almost offended. "Because he wasn't doing them for you to know," I'd replied. She hadn't understood then. Probably still didn't. But I understood. I'd inherited his sense that some things were sacred. That generosity wasn't about building your reputation. It was about honoring your values. The church didn't need to know who helped them. They just needed help. And I realized, sitting in my apartment with that newsletter still open on my screen, that I could help. Not easily. Not without sacrifice. But I could. I spent 3 days running the numbers. My savings account showed $42,000. Money I'd been setting aside for a down payment on a condo. Money I'd earned through late nights and extra projects and saying no to things I wanted but didn't need. I could give $20,000 to the church. It wouldn't solve everything, but it would help significantly. Cover critical repairs. Keep programs running. Honor my father's memory. But giving that much would set back my own plans. Delay the condo purchase by at least a year. Use money I'd worked incredibly hard to save. I thought about my mother's voice on the phone. You can't afford Christmas this year. The bitter irony was that I could afford to give more than most of her gold-level friends. I just did it differently. Quietly. Without announcement. I made my decision on a Tuesday evening. Not to prove anything. Not to hurt anyone. Just because it was right. Because my father would have done it. Because the church that bore his name and memory deserved help. I decided to donate anonymously. No name. No recognition. Just help. $20,000 wasn't easy money for me. It represented 2 years of disciplined saving. Every time I'd chosen to eat at home instead of ordering delivery. Every overtime hour I'd worked. Every vacation I'd postponed. Giving it away meant pushing my own goals back significantly. Meant continuing to rent for another year. Meant delaying stability I'd been working toward. But I thought about my father building that church with his own hands. About the memorial garden where I'd sat after his funeral, finding peace in the quiet space he'd helped create. Some things were more valuable than timelines. I set up the donation through an attorney, ensuring complete anonymity. The church would receive the funds but not know the source. No name. No acknowledgement. Just the help they needed when they needed it. The transfer went through on a Friday. The church announced it Monday morning in a special email blast. Miracle donation received. The email gushed about God's provision. A surprise benefactor had stepped forward with a significant donation. Programs were saved. Repairs could proceed. Faith had been rewarded. My mother's social media lit up with the news. She posted about the donation multiple times, each post more dramatic than the last. God is so good. When we're faithful, He provides. Proof that generosity inspires generosity. So blessed to be part of a community where people understand what truly matters. She beamed in photos at church, soaking up the reflected glory of someone else's gift. The praise in the comments fed her need for recognition. You must be so proud to be part of such a generous church. Your faith community is incredible. My mother's responses were humble adjacent but clearly satisfied. We're just trying to follow God's example. One comment caught my attention. I bet it was someone from your gold-level donors. You people are so giving. My mother's reply. See? God rewards the faithful. The implication was clear. Real Christians, successful, faithful people, gave generously. People like her. People in her social circle. Not people like me who'd been uninvited for being broke. 2 weeks after the donation was announced, my phone rang. My mother's name appeared on the screen. I stared at it for 3 rings before answering. Naomi. Her voice was bright, warm, completely different from our last conversation. How are you, sweetheart? The sudden affection was jarring. I'm fine. I was thinking you should come to church with me this Sunday. We're having a special service to honor the donor who saved our programs. She sounded excited, eager. You should see what real generosity looks like. The words hit like a slap. You should see what real generosity looks like. From the woman who'd uninvited me for being too broke to contribute to Christmas dinner. Why would I want to see that? Ask carefully. Because it's inspiring. It reminds us what's truly important. Material things fade, but faith and generosity last forever. I pause. I know Christmas was difficult. Maybe this is a good time to reconnect. As a family. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just an invitation wrapped in spiritual language. As if nothing had happened. I'll think about it, I said. Wonderful. Service is at 10. I'll save you a seat. Sunday morning I dressed carefully. Nothing flashy. Just clean, presentable clothes. I arrived at Grace Community Church 15 minutes early and slipped into a back pew. The sanctuary looked the same as I remembered. Polished wood. Stained glass. The donation board still prominently displayed, though now with new categories celebrating the mystery donor. My mother sat near the front with her usual group, laughing and chatting. She hadn't seen me come in. I wanted to keep it that way. The service began with worship music. Then came announcements. Then the pastor, Brother Timothy, took the pulpit. Today we celebrate God's provision, he began. 3 weeks ago we faced a crisis. Programs at risk. Building repairs we couldn't afford. We prayed and God answered. The congregation murmured agreement. A generous soul stepped forward. Not seeking recognition. Not wanting praise. Just helping because help was needed. He paused, looking over the crowd. I've asked this donor to reveal themselves today so we can thank them properly. My heart stopped. I'd specifically requested anonymity. What was happening? However, Brother Timothy continued, they declined. They did ask for something else. The sanctuary went quiet. Everyone waiting. Brother Timothy smiled. They asked that we honor someone else instead. Someone who embodied the kind of quiet generosity they hoped to emulate. He gestured to the side wall where photos of memorial donors hung. Many of you remember Marcus Foster. He helped build this church 30 years ago. Worked weekends as a volunteer. Donated materials from his own pocket. Never sought recognition. Just served. My father's photo appeared on the screen behind the pulpit. Younger than I remembered him. Smiling that quiet smile he always had. The donor asked that we remember Marcus today. That we tell his story as an example of what real generosity looks like. Brother Timothy's voice softened. Giving without announcement. Serving without applause. Faith without performance. My throat tightened. I'd written those words in my donation letter. Asked the attorney to include them. Private message about why I was giving. Marcus left behind a daughter who learned his lessons well, Brother Timothy continued. The donor asked that we pray for her today. That she knows her father's legacy lives on in ways he never could have imagined. Brother Timothy paused. His eyes scanning the congregation. The donor has asked to remain anonymous, but they did want one thing made clear. They're not part of our gold-level giving circle. Not part of any leadership committee. They're just someone who learned from Marcus Foster that generosity isn't about recognition. It's about honoring what's right. He looked down at his notes. They asked me to share this. The donation comes from Marcus Foster's daughter. Every head in the sanctuary turned. Looking around. Searching. People whispering to each other, trying to figure out who it could be. My mother's head swiveled, her expression confused. She'd been certain it was someone from her social circle. Someone successful and worthy. Someone she could claim connection to. Brother Timothy continued. She asked that her name not be announced. But she wanted everyone to know that her father taught her to give quietly, to help without applause, and to measure worth by character, not contribution levels. I saw my mother's face change. Confusion shifting to recognition. Color draining away. She whispered my name. I was too far back to hear it, but I saw her lips form the word. Naomi. The donation was $20,000, Brother Timothy announced, and the congregation gasped. From a young woman many of you probably assumed couldn't afford to give anything at all. The words hung in the air like an indictment. I saw people shifting uncomfortably, remembering perhaps how they'd judged, how they'd assumed, how they'd measured worth by appearances. My mother's face crumpled. She looked around frantically, finally spotting me in the back pew. Our eyes met across the sanctuary. She started crying. Not the quiet, dignified tears she performed for sympathy. Real crying. Shoulders shaking. Hand over her mouth. People around her noticed. Reached out to comfort her. Asked what was wrong. She couldn't speak. Just cried harder. Brother Timothy wrapped up his sermon, but I barely heard it. I watched my mother's breakdown from the back row, feeling nothing. Not satisfaction. Not vindication. Just the quiet acknowledgement that truth had finally been spoken. After the final prayer, before anyone could stand, my mother's hand reached up. She was asking to speak. Brother Timothy nodded, and my mother stood on shaky legs. She turned to face the congregation, tears still streaming down her face. "I need to apologize," she said, her voice breaking. "Publicly. Because my sin was public." The sanctuary went completely silent. "My daughter Naomi is here today." She gestured toward me, and every eye turned. "I uninvited her from Christmas. Told her she was too broke to contribute to our family dinner. Made her feel worthless because she wasn't successful enough for my standards." People gasped, whispered. My sister, sitting next to my mother, looked mortified. "And all this time," Mom continued, "she was quietly saving, working hard, living modestly, not to impress anyone, not to gain status, but to help when help was needed. She wiped her eyes. She gave more to this church than most of our gold-level donors. And she did it anonymously because her father taught her that real generosity doesn't need applause." She looked directly at me. "I'm sorry, Naomi. I'm sorry for measuring your worth in dollars. I'm sorry for making you invisible. I'm sorry for being the exact opposite of everything your father tried to teach us." The apology was tangled with her embarrassment. Public and messy. But it was real. Everyone waited for my response. The entire congregation watching. My mother standing there, exposed and crying. My sister looking like she wanted to disappear. Even Brother Timothy waiting to see what I'd do. I stood slowly. Walked down the aisle to where my mother stood. The silence was absolute. When I reached her, I spoke quietly but clearly. Loud enough for the microphone to catch. "I forgive you," I said. "But things need to change." She nodded frantically. "Anything. No more measuring people by their bank accounts. No more performing generosity while missing the point of it. No more public praise while giving private cruelty. I promise. And no more using my love as something you can withdraw when I don't meet your standards. I'm your daughter. Not your trophy. Not your disappointment. Just your daughter." She pulled me into a hug, still crying. "I know. I'm so sorry. I know." I hugged her back but didn't cry. Didn't perform. Just stood there accepting her apology while holding my boundaries firm. After a moment I pulled back. "I'm going to leave now. Before this becomes more about drama than about what actually matters." Brother Timothy nodded approvingly. No applause. No scene. Just truth and forgiveness and boundaries. I walked out of the sanctuary while everyone watched in silence. The calls and messages started immediately. Relatives reaching out. Cousins apologizing. My aunt saying she'd always known I was capable, which was a lie but whatever. My sister called crying. "I'm sorry I went along with it. I should have stood up for you." "Yes, you should have," I agreed. "But you can start now." "How?" "By treating people like they matter, regardless of what they can offer you." The dynamic had shifted completely. Suddenly I wasn't the family disappointment. I was the quiet hero. The generous soul. The one who'd learned Dad's lessons. People reframed the narrative. We always knew Naomi was special. She was just so humble about her success. I told everyone she'd do great things. The revisionist history was exhausting. But I didn't argue with it. Didn't correct anyone. Just let them tell their new stories while I lived my truth quietly. My mother called 3 days after the church service. Her voice was different. Muller. Uncertain. "Can we talk? Really talk? About what?" About how I can be better. How we can have a real relationship instead of the performance I've been putting on. We met for coffee. Neutral ground. Just the two of us. She apologized again, more privately this time. Explained how she'd let social pressure and comparison poison her relationship with me. Your father used to tell me I cared too much what people thought, she admitted. I thought he was being judgmental. But he was right. He usually was. How did you know to give anonymously? Most people would have wanted recognition. Because Dad taught me that the recognition isn't the point. The help is the point. I stirred my coffee. And because I didn't do it for you or for them. I did it for me. To honor Dad. To be the person he raised me to be. She nodded, crying again. I'm proud of you. I should have said that years ago. You should have. But you can start saying it now. We talked for 2 hours. Not solving everything. Not erasing decades of pain. Just starting. Building something real from the ruins of what had been. She asked if I'd come to Christmas next year. Maybe, I said. If it's about family, not about performance. It will be. I promise. I didn't fully believe her yet. Trust wasn't rebuilt in one conversation. But it was a start. Christmas came again. This time the invitation arrived with no conditions. Please come. Just to be with us. No expectations. No contributions required. Just you. I went cautiously. Brought a simple dessert. Sat at the table where an empty chair had been the year before. The dynamic was different. My mother introduced me to relatives as my daughter Naomi, without qualifiers. She asked about my work with genuine interest. She didn't compare me to anyone. It wasn't perfect. Old habits surfaced occasionally. But she caught herself. Apologized. Tried harder. My sister hugged me when I left. I'm glad you came back. I'm glad there was something worth coming back to. Driving home that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not because I'd won some competition. Not because I'd proven my worth. But because I'd held my boundaries and still chosen forgiveness. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Thank you for giving me another chance. I don't deserve it. I replied simply. Generosity isn't about deserving it. Dad taught me that. She'd lost control of the narrative she'd built. Lost the ability to define my worth by her standards. Lost the power she'd wielded through conditional love. And I'd gained something more valuable than any of it. Peace with myself. Honor for my father. And the quiet satisfaction of knowing that when everyone finally saw who I really was, I didn't need to say a word. The truth spoke for itself.